Let me explain what happened to me in the woods. I've got a pretty long story to share, but stick around, it's gonna be worth it. First things first, let's keep things private by using different names. Oh, and a fun twist. This story is also how I met my fiancée, but we'll get to that later. The whole thing went down around August 2017, give or take, back when I was 16. So a couple of months before that, at the start of the summer break, my mom sadly lost her fight against breast cancer. I'm an only child, so me and my mom were tight. She had a fantastic marriage with my dad, so when she passed away, it hit both me and Dad really hard. Even though we kinda saw it coming since her health had been getting worse for a while, the pain still hurt like hell when it actually happened. After Mom's funeral, Dad and I pretty much stuck to the house day in and day out. See, I just finished my sophomore year in high school and didn't have a big circle of friends, so I started distancing myself from the few buddies I did have over the summer. During that time, Dad and I barely talked. There was this weird tension between us that we couldn't shake off, even though neither of us tried really hard to deal with it. After about 2 weeks, Dad started going back to work while I stayed holed up in my room. As summer was coming to an end, Dad started getting worried about me being all isolated. I mean, who wouldn't be worried about their kids spending all their time locked up in their room, right? So he came up with the idea of a camping trip, something our family had always enjoyed. Figured it might help us reconnect, you know? So I thought, why not? I was thinking it'd just be a night or two out in our usual camping spot. We lived in the Pacific Northwest, where there are a ton of awesome camping spots. Our go-to was pretty close to home. So on a sunny afternoon, we packed up around noon and got to our favorite camping spot by 2 p.m. We rolled into our usual spot like we'd done loads of times before. But before we could kick back for the night, we had to check in at this ranger cabin where they charged $10 to park your car. Our campsite was just about 600 feet away, not right next to the lake, but still pretty close. Just to paint the picture, the campground had campsites all bunched up close to each other, only some thin trees between them. You could totally see cars and big tents through these sparse trees. When we got there, we saw the campsite next to ours had an RV parked, which Dad wasn't too thrilled about since RV folks tended to be noisy. The campground was right by a big lake, which was awesome for fishing, so we didn't need to pack much food. A bit down the road and across some rocks, there was a little pebble beach that led to the lake. You could even see the water from our campsite. If you walked along the shore, you'd find more of these cool pebble bays. My parents used to swim in the lake, and they'd always pick a quiet pebble bay away from the crowd. I've never been a fan of big bodies of water and swimming personally. Around 5 p.m., me and Dad went down to the main pebble beach. It was a bit steep and rocky, and you had to watch your step to avoid tripping and getting scraped up. We managed to catch 3 fish and then climb back up to our campsite. Dad asked if I could clean the fish, which I said yes to. The knife I used turned out to be sharper than expected, and I accidentally cut my hand. We didn't have any bandages or first aid stuff, which was a bummer. I didn't want to ask our RV neighbors for help, so Dad went over to get some band-aids from them. Turns out, there was an older couple in the RV, and they were super nice. They gave Dad a whole box of band-aids, saying they had too many. I patched up my hand and we went on with our evening. We had dinner and played some poker for a while before calling it a night. Next morning, I didn't wake up as early as Dad. When I got out of the tent, he was cooking up some food over the fire. He was talking to the friendly elderly couple from the RV, along with a kid about my age who was tapping away on his phone. After a bit of an awkward intro, I found out the kid's name was Lee. We all sat down for breakfast, and Lee turned out to be pretty funny. We hung out all morning, and Dad mentioned how it was great for me to have a new friend. Kinda embarrassed me, so I decided to give Dad some space and asked Lee if he wanted to catch some fish for lunch. He was up for it, so we grabbed our fishing gear and headed to a rocky bay. On the way there, we saw this other kid and his sister building a rock tower. You know, the kind that people use as trail markers. We fished for about an hour, mostly me doing the work since Lee hadn't really fished before. We caught 2 fish, not a ton, but enough for lunch. When we headed back, the siblings were still working on their rock tower. It wasn't massive, just about 3 feet tall, made of big rocks. We hung out for a few more hours, and then around 8 p.m., Lee asked if I wanted to go swimming during sunset. I'm not a big fan of swimming in lakes, especially this one, since it's supposedly over an old abandoned town. Freaks me out. But I didn't want to miss hanging out with Lee, so I said yes. We changed into our swimsuits, grabbed t-shirts to keep warm afterward, and I brought along my cigarettes and lighter, mostly to impress Lee. We told Dad we were going to go for a swim at the bay and would be back in about an hour. He just told us to be careful and enjoy ourselves. By this time it was getting darker, but still light enough to see where we were going. The forest was starting to get shadowy and kind of mysterious. We followed the same trail to the beach. When we got there, I looked to my left and noticed the rock tower from earlier was gone. No rocks stacked up, just flat ground like there never was a tower there. Someone must have messed with the rocks. Both me and Lee saw it, but we didn't say anything about it. We hung out at the main beach for a bit, and then I thought about showing off my cigarettes to Lee. I didn't want Dad to find out, so I suggested we head to a quieter beach. Lee was game, so we walked about 100 feet along the shore. Even though the campsite wasn't far, the slope was kind of steep. Eventually, we found a smaller beach surrounded by trees. To get back to camp, we'd have to cross about 300 feet through the woods. I was sure I knew where we were, so no big deal. At the quiet beach, I pulled out my cigarettes, lit one, and passed it to Lee. We talked for about 20 minutes, Lee smoking and me trying not to cough and look cool. It was getting pretty dark by this time, so seeing the stars was tough. The lake being over that old town always freaked me out, and I was kind of scared to swim. But I didn't want to bail on hanging with Lee, so I decided to give it a shot. The water was freezing, but we swam for about half an hour. When we got out, our shirts were gone. My cigarettes and lighter were still there, though. We hadn't seen anyone around while we were swimming, and there wasn't any wind. But somehow our shirts were gone. We tried looking around using my lighter's dim light, but we found nothing. Then it happened. This weird, crazy groaning sound that didn't sound like any animal I knew. It was like a scream, not the normal cougar cries people say it is. Lee and I were freaked out, so without thinking, we sprinted along the beach, the noise getting louder. It was pretty dark, so we could only see a little by the starlight. We got to the main beach and everything seemed fine, just like when we left it earlier. We were both out of breath and ran up the hill to our campsite. We kept looking back, half expecting something to chase us, but nothing was there. After a tough climb up the hill, scraping our hands and knees on the rocks, we got to the campsite, and it wasn't there. Instead of our camp, we were surrounded by trees and soft ground like nobody had been there in ages. I could hear Lee crying, and I was about to lose it myself. The thing behind us was getting louder, so we ran even farther from those sounds. Lee was right behind me, hoping I knew where I was going. The grunts kept coming, and I didn't dare look back. I'd probably crash into a tree or something. We ran until the sounds faded away. We were exhausted, cold, and sweaty, so we stopped to catch our breath against a tree. We didn't say anything, too scared to even whisper in case we attracted whatever was after us. We stayed put until the noises stopped completely, and then it hit us that we were just two half-naked teens in the woods, crying and looking crazy. Too tired to keep running, we started walking and whispering to each other. We realized it was around 10:30 p.m. or so. Scared out of our minds but determined, we wanted to find the camp or someone who could help us. After walking for about an hour, we spotted a road and followed it to a ranger station. It was empty, but I recognized it as the place we paid to enter the camp. It was across the lake from our camp, so we decided to rest there for a bit. Then I took Lee back to our camp. When we got back, everything was the same. Fire crackling, Dad reading his book. Lee was holding onto my arm as we walked closer. But when Dad saw us, his face went white. I thought it was just 'cause we'd come from a different direction. But what he said hit me like a ton of bricks. "So soon? Did you even go in?" I was about to lose it. He said it was only 9 o'clock and we'd only been gone for about half an hour. I started telling him about the weird stuff that happened, but then I just stopped and asked if he heard anything strange. He looked at us like we were crazy. There was no way I was sleeping in the tent. I wanted to be as far from the ground and the forest as possible. Luckily, Lee suggested we sleep in the RV's bed. Next morning, we talked about everything and none of it made any sense. Our memories matched up, but the whole thing was just baffling. After breakfast, we packed up our stuff around 11 a.m. We exchanged numbers and said goodbye. Dad's still not totally convinced about that night, but me and Lee were engaged now, and we often talk about what might have gone down. I made sure to write everything down when I got home so I wouldn't forget. And that's how I've got this story to share. So weird and scary, I don't ever want to go back. had a video call with my husband who works on an oil rig. It didn't end well. The upcoming video call was poised to mark a pivotal juncture in my existence. In the span of the past half year, my spouse and I had only managed to share a single rendezvous, an occasion we held in deep regard. I nostalgically traced my fingers over my belly, reminiscing about that remarkable night. In perfect alignment with medical calculations, the timing of my pregnancy corresponded precisely with the last instance I had set eyes on my spouse, igniting an eager anticipation within me to convey the felicitous tidings. The surprise of his visit that particular evening had caught me off guard. Engaged in the culinary preparation of pasta with a partly consumed glass of wine, the abrupt chime of the apartment intercom resonated, revealing him at the threshold, bearing flowers adorned with a wolfish grin, his complexion tanned from rig-related endeavors. The fervor of our embrace even seemed to carry the scent of briny sea spray in his hair. The dearth of time for verbal exchange felt inconsequential. Words appeared superfluous. Amidst this rush, I barely managed to turn off the stove before he swept me off to bed. "Let's keep this as our little clandestine affair." His murmured words lingered as he departed, mere hours before dawn. The peculiarity of this utterance initially left me bewildered, a feeling accentuated by later comprehension. Given the shortage of accumulated vacation days, his visit bore an element of risk, likely necessitating an unauthorized medical leave and a rushed scramble to ensure connecting flights. Despite its sweetness, this gesture teetered on the precipice of peril, for discovery could well lead to his job's jeopardy. Ergo, his plea for secrecy regarding our enchanting nocturnal encounter made sense, especially considering the potential repercussions if overheard by colleagues or superiors on the rig. Nevertheless, the moment to apprise him of my pregnancy loomed, fraught with its own risks. Nonetheless, the impetus to convey this pivotal revelation had grown too strong to suppress. Our concerted efforts to conceive had persisted fruitlessly before his departure, rendering the fruition of our desires a matter demanding his cognizance. Gathering my resolve, I initiated the video call. Despite the months of enduring a long-distance relationship, the palpable fluttering within my chest endured as I waited for the connection to establish. The backdrop gradually manifested, a depiction of utilitarian industrial furniture, bunk beds, and walls dressed in gunmetal gray, adorned with snapshots immortalizing our shared moments. And then, his countenance materialized, albeit in pixelated obscurity, yet unmistakably my beloved husband. The passage of time hadn't alleviated our uncertainty about who should initiate the discourse. I succumbed to an unscripted proclamation. "Sweetheart, brace yourself for news. I'm with child." Predictably, the connection faltered, casting my husband's reaction into a shroud of impenetrability. My love?" he stuttered, his hand grazing his visage. "When did this come to pass? And why did you delay in divulging this to me?" "Well, the chronology is quite evident, isn't it?" I chimed with a chuckle. "I would have informed you sooner, but you had requested that I refrain from mentioning it." Upon his part, he arose, scanned his surroundings for potential eavesdroppers, and securely shut the door. An exhale of relief escaped my lips, signaling the advent of an unreserved dialogue, a necessity in this moment of uncertainty. For I yearned to fathom his unfiltered sentiments, given the conspicuous absence of elation in his response thus far, a preoccupation laced with concern and even distress, which mystified me. Our conversations had mulled over this eventuality countless times before, and I had operated under the presumption of our alignment on the prospect of parenthood. "Here's what I require of you now," he intimated, his words delivered with an emphasis on clarity. Indeed, it must have taken place on that specific evening. I confided into the laptop's microphone, my voice barely above a whisper. "You know, the night of your visit 4 months past. I had wanted to apprise you earlier, yet you requested that it remain our secret." He recoiled, grappling with disbelief, a hand pressed to his forehead as he emitted a strangled groan. "You've got to be jesting. Tell me this is a jest, because, my dear, I have not set foot off the rig since my arrival." I blinked, mired in confusion, struggling to process the surreal nature of this disclosure. This couldn't be reality. It just couldn't. A sudden buzz punctured the air, jolting me. The apartment intercom heralded a surreal sight. The visage and voice that greeted me were indistinguishable from my husband's, situated thousands of miles away on an offshore oil rig. "Hello, darling," the entity at my doorstep greeted, mimicking my husband's intonation. "I've brought more flowers for you and our little one."